There is a story told about two fish who meet an older fish that was swimming the other way. The older fish nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two younger fish swim on for a little bit further, and then one of them looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" Which is an echo of the words of Marshall McLuhan, the Canadian philosopher, who said, "I don't know who discovered water, but I know it wasn't a fish." Meaning, if you're from your first breath, you are immersed in something, if from your first moments of consciousness, you are up to your neck and over your head in something, you don't know what it is. It just is. The fish don't know it's water, it's their world, and it's what they swim in. We don't know that we breathe in nitrogen, oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. We call it air, because that's what we live in. And because what we swim and live in isn't a place of perfection, we don't live in a world of right and true execution of will and hope. None of us live without dashed hopes, broken dreams, torn hearts, broken expectations. So I don't know who invented Yom Kippur, but I do know that it was someone who lived and deeply understood what it means to be a human being. It would be far from an exaggeration to say that you and I live in an age of deep and bitter conflict, not as in the past with other nations, but with each other and ourselves. And it's probably the right moment to ask, what's the difference between an argument and a conflict? If arguing is trying to convince another person that you're right, conflict is the act of destroying another person who doesn't agree with you. By and large, the world that we live in has moved quickly past arguing with each other. We've stopped trying to explain and convince other people. Today, we move very quickly to destroying people we think, do, or believe wrong things. The rawness of how we talk to one another, how we delete and cancel people, build up and then tear down other human beings, is actually a symptom, but it's not the problem itself. To listen, even 50 years ago, when politicians debated, they actually debated policies. Today, they just insult each other. The clue to understanding why this is so comes by way of one of the most influential political philosophers from the 19th century, actually from England. His name was John Stuart Mill. Mill, in seeing the development of newspapers and media and bustling cities, warned that people will in time confuse math and ethics, or better in our language, people will confuse facts and emotions. The thing is, 7 plus 7 is always 14. And it doesn't matter what side of the world that you come from, or what language you speak, or what God you worship. Now, you might not arrive at the conclusion immediately that 7 plus 7 equals 14, but when you're shown the obvious proof that you have a bowl of 7 oranges, and then you add 7 oranges to that bowl, you will understand and you'll agree. But what happens when people start thinking what they believe is as empirical as math? What happens when we think that our thoughts about right and wrong, government, politics, and religion are incontrovertibly correct and true? The thing is, there's no amount of oranges that you can take out to make your proof with those things. So we prove them by how we feel. Decades of individualism, telling us to listen to ourselves, telling you to trust your gut, that if your instincts are telling you that you're right, then you must be right because it feels right. The stronger the feeling, the truer it must be. In the accounting of individualism, what I think and what I feel are both true and oh so right. And then we go about the mission of finding the facts and ideas that support our thoughts and feelings. In other words, we don't search and then decide, we decide and then we search. Our world, the modern world, was built on the foundation of European rationalism that questioned, in particular, the church and the king. But us, we doubt everything. We doubt the news. We doubt religion, God and tradition. We doubt our governments. We doubt our teachers, our schools, and our parents. We doubt love, marriage, and family. We doubt everything except for one thing: ourselves. We are always oh so sure that we are right. When the decision was made to send Allied troops to invade Normandy, the commander of those forces and future American President Dwight Eisenhower wrote 2 letters. If it was successful, the first letter praised the brave troops, support personnel, and God for the success on the battlefield, with the prayer that it should bring the brutal war to a quick end. And in case of failure, the second letter said the following: the decision to invade at that hour in those places had been my decision and mine alone. If any blame or any fault attaches to the attempt, it is only with me. Do you want to know why the world is so polarized and angry? It's because everyone thinks that they're right, and everyone else is to blame for what goes wrong. The combination of individualism and radical rationalism has brought us to a precipice. The antidote, of course, is this day. The oldest Siddur, the Jewish prayer book that we have, is called the Machzor Vitry, which dates back more than 1,000 years ago from Vitry, France. Want to know why we stand here as opposed to there? Why a Kaddish is said then as opposed to later? Why the Elenu is at the end as opposed to the middle or the beginning? It's from the Vitry, from the Machzor Vitry. Tonight's sacred pageantry is no exception. On this evening, we will recite the Kol Nidre 3 times, but not in the same way. If you listen closely, you notice the first is slightly softer and lower, the second a bit stronger and louder, and only the third is in its fullest volume. And that is because the Machzor Vitry, that Siddur from 1,000 years ago in France, tells us, defining the way into the deepest parts of ourselves, past the walls and layers of feelings and confidence that we've built around ourselves. To get past that requires effort and time. You don't get there easily. You see, there's a you that is not afraid to be wrong, to make a mistake. A you that doesn't need to be perfect. A you that can live in doubt about yourself. But we need to look deep to find that. Tonight, we circle around it 3 times before we push in. And the story is told of a visiting prince who came to Michelangelo's studio and found him staring at a single 18-foot block of marble. Then he knew that the rumors are true, that Michelangelo had come into his studio every day for the past 3 months, stared at the marble, and then got home for his supper. So the prince asked the obvious question, "What are you doing?" And Michelangelo looked at him and whispered, "Sto lavorando." I'm working. 3 years later, that block of marble that he stared at was the statue of David. Because Michelangelo believed that he wasn't carving stone into art, but cutting stone away to reveal the beautiful that was there all along. Not stone into art, but art from stone. And tonight we each are called to do the very same. Draw art from the stone that we've wrapped ourselves in. Why? Because this is the water that we swim in. Which is, as Leonard Cohen said decades ago, if you don't become the ocean, he said, you'll be seasick every day. Please rise. Page 207. For the honor of the First Circuit, I would like to call upon David Shapira, David Kaufman, Evan Green, Paul Bernstein, Howard Ungerman, and Howard Rothblatt. Page 207.
Shiva Shelemala Uvishiva Shelemata Aldat Hamakom Vialdat Hakal Anu matirin leit palel Im habariani Bishiva Shelemala Uvishiva Shelemata Aldat Hamakom Vialdat Hakal Anu matirin leit palel Im habariani Bishiva Shelemala Uvishiva Shelemata Aldat Hamakom Vialdat Hakal Anu matirin leit palel In habariani Kol Nidre V'yesarei V'charamei V'konamei V'chinoyei
Abba.
Second Circuit, I would like to call upon Mitchell Brown, Norm Gottlieb, Erwin Wartzman, Tal Hillman, Chuck Winograd, Andrew Walensky, Joseph Brown. Peter Zaltz, Arthur Amos, Richard Berg, Stuart Berger, Daniel Walderman, Adam Beckor, and Dylan Rosenthal.
יחררת נעבהון כל הון יהון שרון בתהילים מבוטלים כגודל חסדך וכאשר נסעת לעם הזה ממצרים בידינו ושם נאמר ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדבריך ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדברך, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדברך.
On page 207 for the Sheikhiano, the solo being led by Dr. Avery Crisp. may be seated. Perhaps surprisingly, then again, perhaps not, over the near 80 years since the ending of the Second World War, there has been 7 different days chosen to memorialize the horror of the Shoah, the Holocaust. Over time, those different days have now been whittled down to essentially 2, January the 25th or the 27th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan. January 25th was chosen in 2005 by the United Nations as the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. But I suspect that is not the day that you or I consider to be the true or real day of remembrance. Like you and like me, it is the 27th day of Nisan, designated in Israel as Yom HaShoah. That is the day the sirens are called twice in the evening and the morning, with traffic and movement stopping on the day to pause and remember. And what is the difference exactly between these 2 days? January 25th is the day that Auschwitz-Birkenau was liberated by the Soviet Red Army. The 27th day of Nisan, Yom HaShoah, it marks the day that in 1944 of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. One is the day that we were waiting for the world to save us. The other marks the day that we tried to save ourselves. To some, it might be a trivial difference, but to us, it cannot be. The famed American Jewish author Herman Wouk, he of Marjorie Morningstar, The Winds of War, Caine Mutiny. If you're a certain generation, you're nodding your head. Wrote of the time that he met Israel's first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion invited Wouk and his wife, Sarah, to visit him, to leave Tel Aviv and come down to his retirement home in the Negev desert. The next day, they went to Ben-Gurion's kibbutz, Sde Boker, in a command car escorted by a jeep with a mounted machine gun. Because back then in 1955, that raw little country was being bloodily harassed in broad daylight by the Fedayeen terrorists that infiltrated into Israel from Jordan, Egypt, and Gaza. At this time, Ben-Gurion was not in office, and he was working on his memoirs. And so he spent the day discoursing on history and politics, philosophy, and literature until the sun set. His wife, Ben-Gurion's wife, Paula, came in and invited the Wouks to stay for dinner. And when the dinner ended, Ben-Gurion took them to the gates of the kibbutz with the command car. An armed jeep were there waiting. Wouk thanked him for the day, and Ben-Gurion grabbed his sleeve and said, "You must return here to live, because this is the only place for Jews like you. Here you will be free." Free, Wouk turned around to him and said, "Free? With enemy armies ringing you, with their leaders publicly threatening to annihilate you, with your roads lethal and impassable after sunset, without a machine gun escort, you think that's free?" And Ben-Gurion turned to him and said, "I didn't say safe. I said free." I've known that story for a very long time, but I never quite knew where to place it. That is until this year. With the COVID dog in the house, I find myself going on walks. This time in quiet leaves me to podcasts, and I took to listening to a captivating 6-hour interview with Israel's most recent former Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett. His tenure was brief, just under 2 years, but profoundly successful. Economically, socially, militarily, his government populated by right-wing and left-wing politicians, with Arabs and Orthodox Jews, gays and straights, gave the country what it needed at that time and desperately needs again. At the very end of this 6-hour interview, the interviewer asked him what being the Prime Minister of Israel meant to him, and he finished with this story. Bennett was at an international conference on climate change. Some way or another, Bill Gates heard that he was there and asked to see him. Bennett, a former high-tech founder, of course said yes. Gates told him that the rate and degree of global climate change cannot now be undone by increased integration of electric cars, by eliminating single-use containers, or getting rid of plastic bags. We're too far down the path for those things to make a difference any longer, Gates said. What we need is a breakthrough technological solution to reverse this before it's too late. And then Gates looks him straight in the eye and says, "You're the Prime Minister of the State of Israel. Go and solve this problem." With pain, I admit, with pain, that it may be a long time before we are safe. But Israel allows us to be free in ways that can save the world, in ways the world might not survive without. Our tradition has been, to conduct an appeal for Israel bonds. And there was a time when we had cards and ushers would come in and collect your pledges. They don't print the cards anymore. But here's what I'm going to ask you. After Yom Kippur, that you head to your computer, you go to the Israel Bonds website, and you make your investment. Because a stronger Israel will be amongst the very best you will ever make in your life. Because it is not just money, but values, survival, medicine, life, and one day, God willing, safety too. Gomar Chatima Tova. Everyone, please rise.